She was just skin and bones when they first saw her. Dirt clung to her fur like a second skin, her ribs visible even from a distance. But it wasn't the hunger in her eyes that made them stop. It was the way she stood, frozen by the roadside, trembling, yet unwilling to leave a battered cardboard box behind her. Rain fell in soft sheets that morning, soaking the earth and muffling the usual buzz of the neighborhood. Most people stayed in, sipping their coffee, waiting for the weather to pass. But for Ellie, an early morning jogger with a soft spot for strays, something felt off the moment she turned onto Sycamore Lane. She slowed down when she saw the dog, no collar, no tag, and clearly no recent human touch. Her eyes followed the dog's body language, the way she stood protectively over the box, tail tucked but head high, as if guarding something precious. Ellie stepped closer, heart pounding. The dog didn't growl. She didn't run. She simply whined, a low, sorrowful sound that made Ellie's chest tighten. Carefully, Ellie crouched and peeked into the box. Inside, nestled in a thin layer of newspaper and rain-dampened cloth, were 4 tiny puppies, barely a few days old, their eyes still closed. One let out a weak squeak, another shifted closer to its sibling, seeking warmth. Ellie gasped. "Oh my God, you've been trying to protect them, haven't you?" The mother dog lowered her head, almost an apology, as if to say, "I've done all I can. Please help us." The sight was unbearable. A stray mother, alone, starving, clinging to hope not for herself, but for the tiny lives she'd brought into this cruel world. How long had she been sitting there? How many people had walked past without stopping? Ellie didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone and dialed the nearest animal rescue. As she waited on the line, she took off her hoodie and gently wrapped it around the shivering puppies. The mother dog licked one of Ellie's hands, weak but grateful. "Hang in there, sweetheart," Ellie whispered. "You're not alone anymore." 15 minutes later, a rescue van pulled up. The team moved carefully, bringing warm towels and a portable kennel. Ellie stayed beside the mother the whole time, whispering soothing words as they gently lifted her into the van, followed by her babies. The vet's initial report was heartbreaking. The mother was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from exhaustion. Her body had given everything to keep her puppies alive, and yet somehow she had succeeded. All 4 puppies, while underweight, were alive. They were fighters, just like their mother. At the clinic, they named her Grace. Grace spent the first night curled around her puppies in a heated enclosure, too weak to stand but refusing to let them out of her sight. Staff took turns feeding her small portions of warm food and gently hydrating her. One of the nurses, Mara, sat with her long after the others had left. "You did good, Mama," she whispered, stroking Grace's head. "You kept them safe. You waited and someone came." But what they didn't know yet, what no one knew, was how far Grace had gone for her puppies. The next morning, Ellie returned to the clinic to check in. She asked to see the spot where Grace was found. Driven by a hunch, she retraced Grace's likely steps, miles of alleys, construction zones, and streets with little traffic. And that's when she noticed the trail, a faint path through the mud, shallow paw prints, a shredded corner of an old blanket. It was like following breadcrumbs. Ellie realized then that Grace hadn't just stumbled upon that box. She had carried each of her newborns there, one by one, through the rain, through the cold. Each trip must have been agony. And yet she had done it. She had chosen the box, a spot just visible from the road, near a tree where anyone might notice. It wasn't chance. It was desperation and hope. Ellie's chest ached as she stood by the empty spot where the box had been. Grace had planned it all. She had hidden her babies in the one place where they might be found, and then sat beside them, rain-soaked and starving, praying for a miracle. And somehow, that miracle had come. But just as Grace began to heal, just as the puppies opened their eyes for the first time, something happened that none of them saw coming. And it all started with a strange mark on one of the puppies' backs. The mark wasn't visible at first. It was only after the puppies began to move more, tiny wobbles turning into eager little steps, that the staff noticed. One of them, the smallest of the litter, had a strange patch of fur on her back. At first glance, it looked like a birthmark. But upon closer inspection, the fur was discolored, the skin underneath oddly raised. Mara, the vet nurse who'd spent most nights with Grace and her pups, grew concerned. She gently held the puppy up to the light and examined her back. A slight grimace crossed her face. "This isn't just a birthmark," she muttered. It might be a burn. Ellie had come by that morning with a bag of donated toys and blankets. When she heard Mara's words, she froze. A burn? How would that even happen to a newborn? Mara shook her head slowly. I don't know but this wasn't from being near a fire recently. It's healing. Older. Maybe when Grace was moving them. Something must have happened to this one. They named the little pup Ember. She was the smallest, the quietest, but the way she clung to Grace's belly when nursing, the way she squeaked fiercely when moved, it was clear. Ember was a fighter, just like her mother. But the discovery triggered something in Ellie. She started asking questions, visiting nearby neighborhoods, posting flyers. Someone had to know where Grace came from. Dogs like her didn't just appear out of nowhere. Days turned into a week, and Grace's strength began returning. She was still thin, but her eyes had life now. She wagged her tail when Ellie arrived and let the puppies climb all over her, as if she barely noticed their tiny paws. One afternoon, Ellie got a call from a man who had seen the flyer. You looking for that black and white stray? Seen her around near the old lumberyard. There was a fire there a few weeks back. Someone said a dog was hiding under the trailers. Didn't think she made it. The pieces started to fall into place. Ellie and Mara visited the lumberyard. It was abandoned now, ash-covered and silent. But in one corner of the lot, tucked under a scorched trailer, they found it, a blanket. Burn around the edges. Nestled in soot. And near it, paw prints. Tiny ones. Mara knelt beside the trailer, her hands trembling. She gave birth here, during the fire. That mark on Ember, she must have been burned then. Grace must have gotten them all out, one by one. It was almost too much to imagine. A mother, giving birth in an inferno. Carrying her newborns through smoke and ash. Suffering burns. Risking her life. And then choosing to hide them in a box by the road, hoping someone would care. Back at the clinic, Ellie looked at Grace with new eyes. She wasn't just a stray. She was a warrior. A mother who had defied the odds again and again, just to keep her babies alive. Word spread fast. The story of Grace and her pups made it onto local news, then into online forums, then national rescue groups. Donations poured in. Offers to adopt. People were moved not just by her suffering, but by her strength. Grace became a symbol of motherhood, of courage, of never giving up. And yet, even in the joy of recovery, something lingered. Something Ellie couldn't quite place. Grace was healing, yes. Her puppies were thriving. But Grace never barked. Never played. She always watched the door. As if waiting. Until one night, something strange happened. It was Mara's shift. She'd just finished feeding the puppies their formula when she heard it. A soft thump outside the back entrance. Not a bang. Just a sound. She opened the door to check. And found a second box. Smaller. Torn. Inside, a crumpled old collar. Faded tags. And a bloodied cloth. Mara's hand flew to her mouth. The box was just like the one Grace had used. She turned to look through the glass where Grace and her pups were curled up. And Grace was standing. For the first time. Not just awake. Not just alert. But rigid. Staring at the door. Her tail didn't wag. Her ears were pinned. A soft growl built in her throat. Ellie arrived just as Mara was calling her. She saw the box. Saw Grace's reaction. And felt the tension in the room shift from calm to fear. What had Grace escaped from? And who had just left that box at their door? Because something, or someone, wasn't done with Grace yet. And the past she fought to survive might have just found her again. The shelter had never felt so quiet. Grace stood in her enclosure, body tense. Eyes locked on the doorway as if expecting a monster to walk through it. The growl that rumbled from her throat was unlike anything the staff had ever heard from her. It wasn't fear, it was warning. A mother protecting what she had fought too hard to lose. Ellie crouched by the door of the enclosure, whispering softly. It's okay, Grace. No one's going to hurt you. I promise. But Grace didn't relax. The bloodied cloth inside the new box was old. But the blood was not. It was fresh. And the collar inside, burned. The tag had a name etched into the metal. Duke. Ellie ran a search through the city pet registry. Duke had belonged to someone. Registered to an address on the edge of town. A place Ellie had never heard of. She made a decision. I have to go there, she told Mara. Are you sure? What if it's dangerous? Ellie looked at Grace, who was now curled around her puppies again, but still wide awake. If someone hurt her, left her to die, and now knows where she is, we can't ignore it. The drive was long and winding, leading Ellie out past the industrial zone to a half-collapsed trailer park. Weeds grew over rusted fences. Abandoned cars lined the edge of the lot. At the address listed for Duke, she found a scorched patch of earth and the remnants of a fire. Charred furniture, twisted metal, ashes where a home used to stand. A neighbor stepped out from a nearby trailer. "You looking for the dog?" Ellie nodded cautiously. "She saved the puppies, didn't she? I saw her running back and forth during the fire. Everyone else left. But not her. Do you know who owned her?" Ellie asked. The man scratched his chin. "She didn't have an owner. Not really. She just stayed here. People tossed scraps, but nobody cared. Then the fire came. After that, we thought she died with the rest. Guess not." Back at the clinic, Ellie shared everything she learned. Grace wasn't escaping an abuser. She was escaping neglect. Abandonment. She'd been left behind when the world turned to flames. And still, she had stayed for her babies. The second box. Likely a cruel joke. Maybe someone knew her story had gone viral. Maybe they wanted attention. Or maybe they just wanted to scare the ones helping her. But Grace was done being scared. Something had changed in her since that night. She started walking more. Eating more. Her tail wagged when Ellie entered the room. Her eyes softened when Mara leaned in. And Ember, little Ember with the burn mark, began standing on her own, yapping when hungry, playing with her siblings like nothing had ever touched her but love. Weeks passed. Grace regained weight. Her coat grew glossy. The puppies grew into little balls of energy. And adoption requests kept coming. But Ellie couldn't do it. When the day finally came to place them in forever homes, she stood in the center of the room and looked at Grace. "I know I was supposed to find you someone, but what if that someone is me?" Grace licked her hand. No hesitation. Ellie adopted Grace and all 4 of her pups. She turned her home into a safe space, installing a soft bed in every room and a play yard in the back. She documented their journey online. The Fire Family, she called them. People across the world followed their story. One night, as Ellie sat watching the pups chase each other around the living room, she looked at Grace, who was resting with her head on Ember's back. "You hid them in a box and prayed someone would find them," she whispered. "You were the miracle they needed. And somehow you became mine too." The camera panned to Grace, now relaxed, eyes closed, her breathing slow and peaceful. Because now, she wasn't waiting by a road. She wasn't hiding in a box. She was home. And home was forever. Fade out.